Welcome back, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen. This is Real Big Ten Football Talk Plus One with Chris. This is my first video of the 2019 college football season. Thank you for stopping by, and this one is, as the title suggests, for my fans. Since most of you that watch my content are Ohio State fans, I figured I'd have my first video of the year as an Ohio State game. Unfortunately, this game isn't a pivotal one for the Buckeyes, but may be an interesting one beyond the stat line. As the title suggests, it is the number 4 ranked Ohio State Buckeyes going to Evanston, Illinois to face the unranked Northwestern Wildcats. It will be a game played on Friday night. So without further ado, let's get into our news segment this year. That would be Food for Thought. Just some headlines to have to wrap our minds around and to remember as we go through the video. First one, Ohio State has struggled against this team in recent years, but hasn't lost them since 2004, including the one last year where these two teams played for the Big Ten Championship. That game was closer than I thought it should have been, considering how dominant Ohio State was and how not mediocre, but comparatively weaker Northwestern was. But it was a decent game regardless, I thought. Ohio State has outscored opponents by an average of 49.3 points to 8.8 per game. That is dominance. Dominance, boys and girls, just dominant. Northwestern is 1-4 overall, but records don't necessarily tell the whole story of a particular matchup, as we'll soon find out. They are 0-3 in conference play, the Wildcats. As a caveat to Northwestern's record, they have had a tough stretch of games. But so has Ohio State, before you say anything else as far as that goes. But Northwestern is not a talent-rich team as Ohio State is. So Northwestern has to use their grit and toughness, and they just haven't had enough in the tank to finish games strong as they have started them. Are not built to come back from a deficit, which has shown this year. And as I said, it is a Friday night game, which is a rarity for both teams. In fact, I know for sure these two teams haven't played each other on a Friday night ever in history. I don't think they've ever played each other on a non-Saturday night, honestly. And Ohio State is favored in this game by 28.5, but I do think that has changed with some injuries to Ohio State. They actually reduced that back to 28 points on the nose. Don't really know if that matters a whole lot. I'm not a gambler, but just to let you know, that stat is a little bit outdated. My apologies. So, who have these two teams played so far? We'll look at their records first. Ohio State is 6-0 overall, 3-0 in conference play. The Wildcats of Northwestern are 1-4 overall, 0-3 in conference play. Now, let's look at Ohio State's schedule first, since they are the road team, and they did beat FAU out of the gate 45-21. Not a great, wonderfully impressive performance by the Buckeyes, but a win's a win. But it wasn't impressive, that's why I have it in yellow, since that defense did give up 21 points to an offense that isn't anywhere near as explosive as some of the other offenses Ohio State has faced this year. And then they followed it up with an impressive shutout victory of Luke Fickell's Bearcats, 42-0 in the shoe. Have to give that a green font because Cincinnati actually has played quite strong as of late. In fact, I believe the Bearcats are ranked 24th as of when this video was recorded. And then Ohio State followed it up with a trip to Bloomington, where they crushed the Hoosiers 51-10. Another team is not playing too poorly themselves right now. At sitting 4-2, that Hoosier squad isn't as bad as this score looked. So, that is a testament to Ohio State's strength, and that's why that is also green. Now, the Miami of Ohio game. Most of you that started watching that game from the second quarter on saw dominance by Ohio State, and it was a dominant performance for quarters 2 through 4. But Ohio State started that game down 5-0. Kind of felt like a basketball game for a little bit, honestly. But Ohio State did score 76 unanswered points to hammer that team 76-5 at home. Reason why I have it in yellow is because if Ohio State starts off that flat against a team like, say, Northwestern, they could lose. Since Northwestern may not make the same mistakes Miami of Ohio made that gave Ohio State opportunities over opportunities, and Ohio State capitalized on them. And then Ohio State did go to Lincoln, Nebraska for a primetime matchup and hammered those Huskers 48-7 in the home of the Big Red Nation. Quite an impressive victory, especially on the road at night in Lincoln, Nebraska. Not an easy place to play anyway, and Ohio State did hammer those Huskers. And then Ohio State, this last game, did crush Michigan State 34-10 at home. Not even as close as the score indicates, because Ohio State dominated that team from start to finish. Quite impressive. Now, if we're looking at the home team now, the Wildcats, as I've said, have had a tough stretch of games. In fact, 4 out of the 5 teams they have played do have winning records currently. I believe the Cardinals still has a winning record. They did go to Palo Alto and lost to the Cardinals 17-7 in a close game. Very demoralizing loss for the Wildcats, but they did beat UNLV 30-14 at home. Their lone win of the year. I had to give them green somewhere. I felt bad for them, to be blunt. So I'll give them a green light in that game. Honestly, Northwestern's only bad loss came at the hands of Michigan State, a team with not a very good offense, and that Wildcat team gave up 31 points to a bad offense. Cause for concern in my eyes, especially considering Ohio State's offense is not Michigan State's offense, and Northwestern still gave up 31 points to a bad offense. Now, Northwestern played excellent on the road in Madison and held Wisconsin to only 24 points. Problem being, their offense only scored 15, so they still lost the game. But that was probably the biggest scare Wisconsin has faced all year. Quite impressive Wildcats. Then the Wildcats barely lost to that game in Lincoln, 13-10. Quite a depressing loss for the Wildcats. They just couldn't get enough on offense. As you can see, that has been their problem most of the year, considering they've only scored more than 15 points once in the UNLV game. So, does not bode well for the Cats moving forward, even after this game. But let's look at that dominating performance that Ohio State had against Michigan State. Looking at the tail of the tape, so to speak. It was a 34-10 thrashing Ohio State gave Michigan State. What did Ohio State do on defense? They held Sparty to 18 first downs, 4 of 13 on third, 30.7%, 67 yards on the ground, 218 through the air, 20 of 38 passing, 1 passing touchdown, 1 pick thrown, 285 yards of total offense. Sparty did commit 4 penalties for 30 yards. Ohio State forced 3 turnovers and won the time of possession battle, 31-37 to 28-23. Looking a little bit further, one stat line that does stick out to me and is a little bit of a concern is Ohio State gave up 218 yards to a team that's awful throwing the ball. Lewerke actually looked somewhat competent in this game throwing the football, which is not good for Ohio State's defense moving forward, considering by and large, Lewerke is not as dominant as the stat line would suggest. I would have liked to have seen Ohio State force more picks than just 1 and give up 0 passing touchdowns, even though they gave up 1, which isn't horrible. How did Ohio State do on offense? They were 8 of 15 on third down, 53.3%, 22 first downs in total, 323 yards on the ground. Ohio State acquired against actually a good defense by Michigan State. Ohio State made them look weak. 206 yards through the air for Justin Fields, 17 of 25 on passing, 2 touchdowns to 1 pick thrown. Again, not horrible considering Michigan State has pretty good corners. Ohio State got 529 total yards, did commit 2 turnovers, won the field time of possession battle, I should say. But the one thing that worries me about Ohio State moving forward, in fact, part of this is why they lost their one game last year to a weak Purdue team. 10 penalties for 85 yards. Good thing for Ohio State, they weren't facing a team with a better offense, or Michigan State could have made them pay for those. Fortunately for the Buckeyes, they did not. But 10 penalties for 85 yards. A telling stat, quite scary moving forward. Ohio State desperately needs to clean that up, or they will lose a weird and surprising fashion like they did last year if a team they're facing can take advantage of those miscues by the Buckeyes. Look at Northwestern. Speaking of that Wisconsin game, let's look at it and see why Northwestern lost. Now, as you can see on offense, you can see probably right away why Northwestern might have lost. 5 of 20 on third down, 25% third down efficiency. Still, the Wildcats got 21 first downs. Don't know how they managed that one. 97 yards on the ground. Not great. It wouldn't be horrible if they wouldn't have only gotten 158 yards through the air. 18 of 41 passing. That is awful, but did get 1 touchdown to 1 pick thrown. Not a horrible ratio considering the defense the Cats went up against. But only 255 yards of offense, committed 3 turnovers, and lost the time of possession battle, 31 minutes 21 seconds to 28 minutes and 39 seconds. Did only commit 4 penalties for 23 yards, not too bad. Now, how did the Cats do on defense? They held the Badgers to 4 of 16 on third down, 25% third down efficiency, only 13 first downs gotten, only 130 yards on the ground, 113 through the air, but Wisconsin is not a passing team. So, I have to give that also to the Wildcats. 15 of 24 passing, 0 touchdowns thrown, and Cone did throw 1 pick. Held the Badgers to 243 yards of total offense. Badgers did commit 7 penalties for 79 yards, potentially a contributing factor to why the game was so close. Did commit 2 turnovers as well. Why I like this matchup, why I picked it instead of Northwestern's lone win, or their closer loss to Nebraska, is we know how good Wisconsin's been this year. The fact that Northwestern, at the time 1-2, held the Badgers to 130 yards on the ground. I haven't looked, but I would imagine it was probably their lowest statistical, I should say, that's probably their lowest rushing yard total this year. And I include against Michigan. That's pretty daggone good. So it shows Northwestern is tough on defense, but they just can't get anything going on offense. It's sad to think because their defense plays with such heart, their offense needs to pick them up a little bit. If this team could be complete, could be a scary team moving forward. Could play spoiler for quite a few teams, including potentially Minnesota later on in the year, and Iowa. Now let's look at the last 5 meetings Ohio State has faced with Northwestern. Like I said last year, Ohio State did win 45-24 in the Big Ten Championship. Game was closer than the score indicates. I do believe one of those touchdowns was garbage time for Ohio State. The game was pretty much over at that point. But regardless, the score looks good anyway, I guess you could say. And like I said, that was for the Big Ten Championship. 2017, or 2016, I should say, was a much closer game, and Ohio State really could have lost that game, but they got lucky down the stretch and held on to win 24-20. In 2013, Ohio State beat Northwestern on the road, 40-30. Both teams were ranked in that game. It was a very hyped-up game, but Northwestern did fall short in the end. And then going back further than that, like I said, these two teams don't play each other much. They used to play each other more back in the 90s, but since the Big Ten expanded and had 2 different divisions, Northwestern is in the West, Ohio State is in the East, so they just don't play each other all that much. You can look at the SEC for an example of that, where Florida and LSU don't play each other very often, which is unfortunate considering the game that they played the other night. So, anyway, back to this game. 2008, Ohio State did hammer a ranked Northwestern team again on the road, 45-10. And then 2007 was just a complete blowout by Ohio State at home, 58-7. So as you can see, Northwestern hasn't had much success in this series. Like I said, their last win against Ohio State was in 2004. So let's look at the red zone efficiency for both teams. Ohio State isn't too bad at 3.7 attempts per game. That ranks 50th in the country, 86.7% in total, as 45th in the country, and Ohio State does score touchdowns 80% of the time when they get inside the 20. Quite impressive. Again, we'll look at Northwestern's offensive woes, and it does show in their efficiency, or lack of it. Northwestern is only giving themselves 2.6 red zone attempts per game. That is 99th nationally. And when Northwestern gets inside the 20, they're only scoring 68.8% of the time. That's another reason why they are 1-4 directly. That is 121st in the country. And when they're inside the red zone, when they actually score touchdowns, they're only scoring touchdowns inside the 20, 43.7% of the time. I'm shocked. I'm speechless for that stat. Northwestern, here's a tip. Score touchdowns more often inside the 20. You might win some games that way. You might score more than 15 points more often. Got to clean that up, or you'll get crushed in this game, because Ohio State does score inside the 20. They don't get inside the 20 as much as you would think, considering they're ranked 4th, but when they get inside the 20, they make use of it. Northwestern, you've got to do a better job of this in this game. Looking at offensive efficiency in general, Ohio State quite dominant in all aspects. 534.5 yards of offense per game. That ranks 7th nationally. 55.9% on third down. That is sheer dominance, and that is the best in the country. And at +7 turnover margin, the Buckeyes do take care of the ball and do force turnovers. That margin rank is 23rd nationally. Now, Northwestern is pretty much a polar opposite of what I just said. 292.8 yards per game. That is 125th nationally. 33.3% on third down. Are you kidding me? That is 111th nationally. At -4 turnover margin. Cats, got to take care of the ball. Got to force turnovers. Got to improve that moving forward, or you may not win another game this year. That is -4 is 115th ranked nationally. We'll move forward. Passing offense. What passing offense for Northwestern? Ohio State doesn't throw the ball much, but when they do, they are efficient at it at 70.4% completion percentage per game. That is 10th nationally, but only 246 passing yards. That is 63rd nationally. And Justin Fields gets knocked down more often than you would like, at being sacked 2.2 times per game. That is 66th nationally. Be that as it may, Justin Fields doesn't throw many picks. In fact, he's thrown one this whole year. Now, look at Northwestern. They don't throw the ball very effectively. And when they do, it's not efficient. I guess that they both mean the same thing, but you know what I mean. Northwestern's completion percentage is 49.4%. That is 125th nationally. At 140.4 passing yards per game, that is 123rd. Northwestern, you don't throw the ball much. When you do, you got to complete those passes. Give yourselves a chance. And with that being said, Northwestern still gets sacked more often than Ohio State, allowing 2.4 per game. That is 81st. You don't throw the ball much. When you throw the ball much, you don't throw it accurately. Yet you've still thrown 8 picks this year. Got to clean up some of that. Any of that would be a help. That's just atrocious. And that's another direct reason why you're 1-4. Rushing splits. Ohio State, again, quite dominant. 288 yards on the ground, 0.5, I should say, per game. That is 3rd nationally. And against the run, Ohio State is also just as dominant, only allowing 82 yards per game. That is 8th nationally. Northwestern, you struggle in this department as well, only 152.4 yards on the ground per game. At least that is more than you throw, but still not great. That's 80th nationally. You're okay against the run, not great, but at least this is yellow font. 142.8 yards you're allowing per game. That is 53rd nationally. Because a team like Ohio State, you're going to want to at least only allow that. Good luck. Since you don't have much of an offense, your defense will get tired. You're going to figure out something on offense to keep Ohio State's offense off the field. We'll talk about that later. Looking at passing defense, Ohio State quite dominant on all fronts, only allowing 54.6% completion percentage. That is 21st nationally. To put it another way, Ohio State is only allowing opposing quarterbacks to complete 54.6% of their passes. That sounds better. Only allowing 152 yards through the air. That is 3rd nationally. But as a caveat to that, Ohio State hasn't really played a whole lot of pass-heavy teams. Look at Nebraska, Michigan State, Indiana, Indiana too, Cincinnati. Those teams don't pass the ball all that much. In fact, Indiana, I think, out of those 4, passed the ball the most. And still not that much. So, that is a caveat. That might be why Ohio State doesn't allow that many passing yards, but regardless, that is an impressive number, and that is why it's in green, and it's still 3rd nationally regardless. Ohio State does get after the quarterback quite often at 4.5 sacks per game. That is the best in the country, and that defense has picked off opposing quarterbacks 8 times this year. Northwestern, you are allowing far too many passes to be completed against you, at allowing 62.14% of opposing quarterbacks' passes to be completed against you. That's 72nd nationally. But, at the very least, you haven't allowed many big passes against you, only allowing 176 yards through the air against you per game. That is 14th nationally. Quite impressive. But won't necessarily help you against a team like Ohio State, who doesn't really throw the ball all that much anyway. And you do need to at least try to get some pressure on fields. You haven't gotten much pressure against opposing quarterbacks this year at only 2 sacks per game. That is 72nd nationally. Quite surprising considering Pat Fitzgerald is your coach, and he was quite dominant at getting after quarterbacks in his heyday when he played. And you've only gotten 2 picks against opposing quarterbacks this whole year. Granted, you played 1 less game than Ohio State. I don't care. That's still less than 1 pick acquired per game. Got to do a better job of that. Got to force fields in making decisions and get some picks and give your offense shorter field. Got to win the field position battle if you're Northwestern. Offensive scoring efficiency, actually scoring points with Northwestern, doesn't do much this year, but we'll look at Ohio State first. At 49.3 points scored per game, quite dominant for the Buckeyes. Their scoring margin is outscoring opponents by 40.5 points. That is the best in the country. In the first quarter, Ohio State is averaging 11 points per. That is 9th nationally. Now, Ohio State does struggle scoring points in the 4th, but if you've looked at their last 6 games, they haven't had to have their starters play in the 4th quarter much, so that might contribute to why this number is so low. The number is, of course, 6.2 points per 4th quarter played. That is 86th nationally. Northwestern, you can't score at any point in the game at only averaging 14.4 points per game. You're getting outscored by your opponents 5.4 points. That is 87th nationally. In the first quarter, you start out ice cold at only scoring less than a field goal per first quarter, 2.6 points. That is 122nd nationally. Kind of surprised not ranked lower. That's quite horrible. And in the 4th quarter, you don't do much better, only scoring 6.6 points. That's 78th nationally. You don't have the excuse Ohio State has. You need to have your starters play all 4 quarters. And when they do, you still can't score in the 4th. Got to score points in the 4th quarter. Got to start out hot. Got to find an advantage somewhere. And I don't see you getting one, at least according to the stat line. Looking at points allowed, both teams do quite well. Ohio State has only allowed 8.8 points total per game. That is also best in the country. And Ohio State averages allowing only 1.3 points scored in the first quarter. That is 6th nationally. In the 4th quarter, Ohio State shuts the door on defense, only allowing less than a field goal scored per 4th. That is 4th ranked nationally. In fact, the Bucks only allow 2.5 points on average scored in the 4th. Northwestern, you only allow 19.8 points per game. Wouldn't be bad if you scored more than 15 points per game. Be that as it may, that stat line does rank 20th nationally. Pretty good. Again, your defense has heart. Not saying your offense doesn't have heart, but your offense has no direction. Your offense can't score, can't move the ball. Got to have both sides of the ball covered if you want to win in this day and age. Per first quarter played, points allowed, Northwestern is only allowing 5.6 points per first quarter. Not bad at 59th nationally. In the 4th, Northwestern doesn't allow a horrible amount of points, only 5.4, that is 38th nationally. Those point totals are actually pretty low. Problem is, your offense scores less than those numbers in those 2 quarters. The money quarters, in my opinion. How hot do you start? How hot do you finish? That's why I use 1st and 4th quarters when I'm looking at these stat lines. 2nd and 3rd is important, but not as important as I believe as far as how a team starts and how a team finishes. That's why I use 1st and 4th quarter point totals only. Self-imposed errors. Ohio State also does a very good job in this department at only committing 5.33 penalties per game. That is 23rd nationally. But, like I said, Ohio State did commit 10 penalties in that Michigan State game. Cannot do that in a game like this one, where it could be a trap game, where Ohio State might look past this team to their next opponent, which is Wisconsin. A story outside of the stats, like we talked about earlier. This game isn't just about the stats, but stats do help us in moving forward and in making predictions, going off past trends, that sort of thing. Ohio State's only leaving 49 yards on the field in penalties. Has only committed 6 turnovers this year. That's 1 per game. Not great, not horrible. That ranks 20th nationally. Now Northwestern, you're pretty good at being disciplined on both sides of the ball, only committing 5.8 penalties yourselves. That's 39th nationally. And only leaving 48.6 penalty yards on the field per game. Not horrible. But where you struggle, where you've got to clean it up, where you can't do this, playing a game like this, you turn the ball over 12 times. That's more than 2 per game because you've only played 5 games. That is 107th nationally. That's something you got to take care of in this game, or you will lose badly. Neat little tidbits. I like this segment. It teaches me and you, the viewer, a little bit something new about these two teams. The teams did play each other for the first time in 1913, 106 years ago. Ohio State won that matchup in dominant fashion, 58-0. Northwestern has not beaten Ohio State under Coach Pat Fitzgerald. In 2004, Northwestern was not coached by Fitz. Ohio State last lost to Northwestern in 2004, and that game was in Evanston, like this one is. Ohio State has dominated this series, 62 wins, 14 losses, and 1 tie. Ohio State's all-time win-loss tie record is 917 wins, 325 losses, and 53 ties. Northwestern, not quite so impressive. This shows how bad this team truly was in the 70s, 80s, and most of the 90s. Pretty much most of my childhood, and a good portion of probably most of your childhoods to people that are watching this video right now. Northwestern's all-time win-loss tie record is 546 wins, 669 losses, and 44 ties. I like that segment. What can I say? Now, looking at the keys to the game, so to speak, Ohio State wins if you exert your dominance on the line early by forcing a quick 3-and-out on D and establishing the run game early on offense. Don't force Justin Fields to have to win the game with his arm. That's why I say establish a running game first. Then you can go for some of those home run passes that you have dominated in convincing fashion most of the year. But to allow the passing game to complement the running game as well. Keep Northwestern guessing. Force turnovers on defense to kill Northwestern's momentum. Since it is in Evanston, you want to give those fans as little to cheer about as possible. Stay on the field on third downs on offense. Don't allow yourselves to get into third and longs. Try to get into third and manageables. 3rd and 5 or less is usually the optimal yards to gain in that scenario, at least in my opinion. You want to force Northwestern to 3rd versus 6 in the red zone. Northwestern has done a great job at not scoring touchdowns in the red zone. Try to continue that trend for them in this game by helping them to not score touchdowns in the red zone. And you must play discipline, no momentum killing penalties. Again, you could have lost that game against Michigan State if you didn't play so well on both sides of the ball, but just on penalties alone, especially in a close game, that can be the determining factor whether you win or lose. In addition to the turnover battle, of course. Northwestern wins if you can be creative on offense and move the ball incrementally through short passes and runs to the outside. One thing I didn't mention here, I want to mention here. Another way Northwestern can win this game. Ohio State, if the Buckeyes come out flat, committing penalties, sluggish, Northwestern, you've got to take advantage of those. Have to take advantage of the miscues. Have to play mistake-free football on your side. Can't turn the ball over. Can't commit dumb penalties. You have to play clean football to beat this Ohio State team. Don't care if you're playing at home, in the shoe, on the moon. If you don't play good, sound, clean, complete football, you will lose. But moving forward, you want to force Ohio State into 3rd and outs and 3rd and longs to try to get off the field when you're on defense. If you consistently allow Ohio State into 3rd and shorts, they will nickel and dime you up the field, killing your momentum and killing your defense. Force some daggone turnovers, please. You have to force turnovers to beat a dominant team like Ohio State. Force miscues and take advantage of them. You have to give your offense a short field. Your offense is not designed to march up the field 90-some yards. You have to win the field position battle. And also the time of possession battle wouldn't hurt you. You're at home. Score first to establish momentum early. Come out of the gate. Get the ball. Score. Give yourselves some confidence on offense. Keep the pace of the game slow. Don't get into a shootout. You will not win. Keep the penalties to a minimum and don't commit turnovers. We already talked about that. So, who to pick? Based on what I've seen from these two teams, based on the fact that Ryan Day keeps Ohio State always playing focused, regardless of the opponent they're playing. Ohio State doesn't play down, play up. They play to their level and their level only. That is why I don't believe Northwestern has a chance to win this game. I'm sorry, Cats. That's just the way it is. I'm picking Ohio State to win this and not quite cover the spread, but at least close. I do see Ohio State winning 31-3. Could be more, could be less. If Ohio State comes out, plays good, clean, sound football, commits a few penalties, doesn't shoot themselves in the foot, I see this being more lopsided than that. Northwestern is just not designed to score points. They're designed to shut opposing offenses down and give their offense a short field, which they haven't done much of this year. Northwestern's tough, they're scrappy. They might make this a game. I don't think so. I think it's going to be a barn burner at the hands of Ohio State, and I see the Bucks winning 31-3. Thank you for watching. Please like this video if you did indeed like it. Hit Subscribe and hit the notification bell beside it if you do enjoy my content and want to see more of me. The bell will let you know when I produce new content. Please also share this video with those who love football as much as you and I do. That does also help my channel grow. Please dislike this video if you didn't like anything about it. You don't like the font sizes, what I said, my voice, the fact that, I don't know, anything. Please hit that dislike. Thank you for watching and have a nice day or night.